first to thank Dieter Bohor and Florian Monsach and Martin Sponenberg, who invited me and welcomed me here, and of course to thank all of you for being there today. I gave to my joke the title The Emancipated Spectator. As I understand it, the title is always a kind of challenge. It sets forth the presupposition but an expression. For instance, the Emancipated Spectator makes sense. But there is a link between separate terms, which also mean between concepts, problems, and theories, which seem at first sight to bear no direct relation to each other. In a sense, this title first expresses the perplexity that was mine when Martin Sponenberg invited me to deliver what is a kind of keynote lecture in this academy. He told me that he wanted me to introduce this collective reflection on spectatorship because he had been impressed by my book, The Ignorant Schoolmaster. I first wondered what kind of relationship there should be between the cause and the effect. This is an academy bringing together artists and people involved in the world of art, theater and performance on the issue of spectatorship. The Ignorant Schoolmaster was a meditation on the eccentric theory and the strange destiny of Joseph Jacques, a French professor who, at the beginning of the 19th century, made a mess in the academic world by asserting that an ignorant could teach to another ignorant what he did not know himself, by proclaiming the equality of intelligence and calling for intellectual emancipation against the standard idea of the instruction of the people. This theory sank in oblivion in the middle of the 19th century. The lack of any obvious relationship could be a chance. It could provide the opportunity of taking a certain distance from the theoretical and political presuppositions, which still show up, in my view, even in postmodern disguise, most of the debate on theater, performance, and spectatorship. I got the impression that it was possible to make sense of the relationship if we first try to piece together the network of presuppositions that put the issue of spectatorship at a strategic crosspoint in the discussion of the relationship between art and politics. And if we try a global pattern of rationality, on the background of which we have been addressing for a long time the political issues of theater and spectacle. I'm using here those terms, theater and spectacle, on purpose in a very general meaning, including dance, performance, and all the kinds of spectacle performed by acting bodies in front of a collective audience. Well, in the first instance, the numerous debates and polemics that had called the theater into question through history can be traced back to a very simple contradiction. We can call it the paradox of the spectator, a paradox which may prove more essential than the well-known paradox of the comedian. This paradox can be summed up in very simple terms. On the one hand, there is no theater without spectators, but on the other hand, spectatorship is posited as a bad thing. Being a spectator means looking at a spectacle, of course. Now, looking appears as a bad thing from 2 points of view. First, looking is posited as the opposite of knowing. It means being in front of an appearance without knowing the conditions of its production or the reality which stands behind it. Second, looking is put as the opposite of acting. He or she is on his or her seat without any capacity of intervention. Being a spectator means being passive. The spectator is supposed to be separated from the capacity of knowing in the same way as he is separated from the possibility of acting. From that very old diagnosis, it was possible to draw two opposing conclusions. The first one is that theater in general is a bad thing, that it is a stage of illusion and passivity which has to be dismissed in favor of what it forbids, knowledge and action. This conclusion has been drawn long ago by Plato. The theater is a place where ignorant people are invited to see suffering people. What takes place on the stage is a pathos, the manifestation of a disease, the disease of desire and pain, which is nothing but the self-division of the subject caused by the lack of knowledge. The action of theater thus is nothing but the transmission of that disease through another disease, the disease of empirical vision, which looks at shadows. Theater thus is the transmission of the ignorance which makes people ill through the medium of ignorance, which is optical illusion. A good community, therefore, is a community which doesn't allow the mediation of the theater, a community whose collective virtues are directly incorporated in the living attitudes of its members. This seems to be the more logical conclusion of the problem, if it is, of course, posited in that way. We know, however, that it is not the conclusion that was most often drawn. The most usual conclusion runs as follows. Theater involves spectatorship, and spectatorship is a bad thing. Therefore, we need a new theater, a theater without spectatorship. We need a theater where the optical relation implied in the word theatron is subjected to another relation implied in the word drama. Drama means action. The theater is a place where an action is actually performed by living bodies in front of living bodies. The latter may have resigned their power, but this power is resumed in the performance of the former, in the intelligence that builds it and the energy that it conveys. The true sense of the theater must be predicated on that acting power. Theater has to be brought back to its true essence, which is the contrary of what is usually known as theater. What has to be pursued is a theater where spectators will no longer be spectators, where they will learn things instead of being captured by images, and become active participants in a collective performance instead of being passive viewers. This turn has been understood in two main ways which are antagonistic in their principle, though they are often mixed in theatrical performance. On the one hand, the spectator must be released from the passivity of the viewer. He must be proposed the spectacle of something strange, unusual, which stands as an enigma and demands that he investigates the reason for that strangeness. He must be pressed to switch to the status of the scientist who observes phenomena and looks for their clues. On the other hand, the spectator has to leave the status of a mere observer who remains still and untouched in front of a distant spectacle. He must be dragged away from his delusive mastery, drawn into the magic power of theatrical action, where he will exchange the privilege of the rational viewer for the possession of its true vital energies. We recognize those two paradigmatic attitudes, epitomized by Brecht's epic theater and Artaud's theater of cruelty. On the one hand, the spectator has to become more distant. On the other hand, he has to lose any distance. On the one hand, he has to change his look for a better look. On the other hand, he has to leave the very position of the viewer. The project of reforming the theater ceaselessly wavered between these two poles. This means that the presupposition